Welcome to this video on the topic of statistics. In this video, we're going to have a look at how we can represent categorical data using some graphics. A categorical data is statistical data that is non-numerical in nature, or in other words, there's no numbers involved. Such data may be processed using a tally and frequency table and subsequently representing the data with various charts. Now the charts we're going to look at in this particular video are column graphs, bar charts, and finally pie charts. We're first going to learn how to draw them by hand, and then we're going to have a look at how we can use the calculator to draw them for us. Now drawing our attention to below over here, what we have is some categorical data. This data is representative of furniture sold at a store. Now inside here, on the left, we have F, which represents a set of data points. Inside the data we have T, S, B, and C. This is representative of tables, chairs, sofas, and beds. So what we've got is a furniture store and how much furniture they've been selling. Now what we're going to do with this data is we're firstly going to process it using a tally and frequency table. Now a tally and frequency table is simply a way of sensibly organizing categorical data. Now the way in which we start drawing this is, we first look at the data that we're trying to represent. In our case we're dealing with furniture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by the space shown over here. I'm going to write furniture, and this will be my first column. Now the next column I'm going to need in my tally and frequency table is a column called tally, and I'll space it out a little even though I don't really need to. And then the final column I'm going to have is a column called frequency. Now the reason I'm spacing it out like this is because one, I've got a little bit of foresight of what's to come, but secondly, the tally itself, although it doesn't take much letters to spell, you want to allocate a little bit of space in here, a little bit of extra space, because we're going to fill up what goes in the table. Now next step is using a ruler, I'm going to nice and neatly draw a straight line, a straight horizontal line to rule off underneath. It's important that we're always using a ruler where possible, as it's very important to have neat looking diagrams, as the whole purpose of drawing these diagrams is to make information easier to read. If we're drawing stuff freehand, as in we're drawing stuff and we're not putting much effort into the presentation, then it defeats the whole purpose of drawing these figures. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my furniture. I'm going to go up and see how many different types of how many varieties of furniture we have. In this case we have T, S, B, C, tables, chairs, sofas and beds. So there's a total of 4. Consequently, what I'm going to do is underneath the furniture column, I'm going to write tables. Then I'm going to rule this column off. Again, I'm going to use a ruler so it's nice and straight. I want to make everything easy to read. Done. Now the next step is we need to start populating the tally section. Now the way in which we populate the tally section is we go up to our data set here and we systematically go through one by one. Every time we see a new item, in this case I see T over here, I'm going to cross it off and then I'm going to put a mark in my T section. I see an S, I give a tally to the S. I see a B, I give a tally to the B. I see a C, I give a tally to the C. I'm going to do this one by one so I don't skip any instances. Okay, so I've finished the process of tallying. Now the next step is I need to count all of the tallies, after which I'm going to write it in the frequency section. So I'll rule off my tally section, then I need to count. So because I've tallied it, it's really easy to count. I go 5, 10, 11, 5, 7, 8, or 5, 6, 7, 5, 6, and then 4. Closing off the tally and frequency table, I work out the total, so I write total, dot, dot, and then I simply add them all together. 11 plus 7 is 18, plus 6 is 24, plus 4 is done. So this is my tally and frequency table. Now what this table is going to enable me to do is, because everything's grouped in a nice tidy way, it allows me to easily observe what's going on and then convert this into some graphical figures. Now the first figure we're going to look at is called a column chart or a column graph. Now the column graph is going to turn this information here into some bars that go in a vertical direction. What this allows us to do is, rather than having to read the information, we can just look at the information. Now the way in which this works is that on the vertical axis we have the frequency, and on the horizontal axis we have the furniture type. Now the furniture type in this instance is, I'm going to represent the bars or the columns by 2 boxes, and I want to have spaces in between each of the bars. The reason for that is because it's a column chart. We like to have space, or we like to have gaps between our bars. Now on the vertical axis we're looking at some numerical information, as in the frequency or the rate at which these items occur. So down the bottom I'm going to start at 0, and then I'm going to start counting up by 2. So we'll go 0, 2, 4. Now the reason I'm stopping at 12 and not going any higher is because if I look at the largest number in my frequency, tally and frequency table in the frequency column, it's 11. So all I need to do for the column graph is ensure that I'm able to represent the largest number or the largest frequency over here. In this case I could go to 14, so 12 is perfectly fine here. Now next step is I need to allocate data or space down below. So I'm going to go tables, chairs, sofas, and then finally beds. Now next step is I need to draw in my shapes. So what I'm going to do using a ruler is I'm going to draw in some columns. So in the first instance we're drawing in tables. It has a frequency of 11, so I draw it in the section under T, and I draw it up to 11, just like that. Now next step is I need to draw in the chairs, sofas, then finally beds. And I need to adjust it to the right size. So the chairs, there are 7, so I'll take it down to 7. There are 6 sofas, and there are 4 beds. And then finishing it off, I should give the graph a name. So in this instance I will call it occurrence of furniture sales, just like that. Now the final thing you could choose to do to this graph if you wanted to is you can change the colors of these up a little bit, and the purpose of this is it just makes it more aesthetically pleasing to observe. So we've got a column graph here. So the difference between this and this is this we have to read the information, this we can just look at it to get our information out of it. Now on top of this we can also draw a bar chart. Now the bar chart is very similar to a column graph, where the difference lies in the orientation of the axes. On the vertical axis, rather than having frequency, we now have furniture type. And then on the horizontal axis we have frequency. Now the way in which this is going to be oriented is we're still going to have some bars, because we're going to have columns, but rather than calling them columns, we call them bars because they go in a horizontal direction. Again, we have spacing between each of the bars, so it's going to look something like this. Now deciding what it's going to look like, at top I'm going to write in tables, chairs, sofas, and finally we're going to have beds. Now on the frequency axis we're going to count upwards again. Now over here we counted up by 2s purely because I wanted to preserve some space. In this one we can afford to count by 1, so we're going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now next step is we need to start drawing in our information. So starting off, I'm going to draw in my chairs. So using a ruler, I'm going to draw a nice straight line. Again, reason for this is the purpose of drawing these sort of figures is to make the data easier to digest. It's only easy to understand if it's drawn in such a way that we can actually read it. If you didn't use a ruler, then it's not going to be understandable, and therefore there's no point even doing this. Thus, what we have over here is our bar chart. Final thing to add to it is we just give it a title. Again, it can be the same as before. Occurrence of furniture sales. So again, rather than having to read the information, we can simply infer it by looking at the figure. Now the final type of figure we're going to look at is a pie chart. Now the pie chart differs from the column graph and bar chart in that firstly it's harder to draw, but secondly, rather than showing us absolute values, it's going to show us percentage values. So it's going to compare the occurrence of each of the items against one another in terms of a percentage. Now the way in which we generate the data for this is we have to use that tally and frequency table. The way in which this is going to work is we first draw in our pie, and then we need to start allocating the slices. So the number of slices is dependent on how many different items we have in the tally and frequency table. In our case, we have 4 different items. Now looking at the biggest item, we have tables. Tables has a frequency of 11, which is the largest of all of them. Because of this, the slice representing tables is going to be biggest of all the slices. To determine the quantitative size of this slice, we have to work out the percentage that it takes up. So it will be 11 divided by the total amount of items, 28. This will tell us that we're dealing with 0.39 or 39%. Now taking this back, what we want to do is we want to figure out how much percentage of, or how much degrees this will take up on the pie, so 39%. The way in which we do this is we get this initial calculation here in decimal form, and then we're going to go shift answer times 360, because there's 360 degrees in a circle. This yields how much degrees this slice of the pie will take. In our case, it's 141. Now typically we'd like to measure this accurately with a protractor. However, we're probably not going to have protractors on us. So what we need to do is we need to make let's say an informed judgment of how big this should be. So I'm going to start off at the top over here, should be okay. And then I'm going to roughly measure out 140 degrees. 141. Now I know 0 degrees is here, 90 is here, 180 is here. So 140 has to be roughly about there. So this is, or this slice here is indicative of the amount of tables that were sold. Alright, so this is the first part. For the next part, we're going to have a look at the slice of the pie for the chairs. So going back up, I'm going to go in and I'll put in, change my 11 to now 7. And what we can see is we need 90 degrees allocated for the chairs. So 90 degrees is going to be a 90-degree angle, so it's going to look something. There's our chairs. Now for our sofas, that will give us roughly 77%. So again, I just do my best to make it around about the right size. So that's about 77. And then finally the leftover space is going to be for the beds. So we know, so we have tables. So this is our pie chart. Now to be able to generate all the data on our calculators, what we can do is we can go up into menu, over into stats, so press 2, or you can just click in like this. And then what we're going to do is, looking at our tally and frequency table, what I'm going to do is, in order, I'm going to write in the frequencies. So the first one's 11, 7, 6, 4. Now generating a column graph, I'm going to go across into graph, then I'm going to go into set, after which I'm going to go down, and rather than having scatter, yours could be anything, we're going to go in and we're going to look for bar. We then go down into list to make sure this is set to list 1 or whatever our list is that this is put in. From there we go graph, and what you can see is we're able to generate a column graph shown over here. So strangely enough, in the calculator they call this a column graph, whereas we've drawn a bar chart here. Now the next one we're going to draw is our pie chart. We don't actually have an option for a bar chart as far as I understand for these calculators. So we're going to follow the same, except we're going to set, and rather than bar we're going to go for pie, so F4. Make sure this is set to list 1 and this is set to percentage. We go across, we hit graph 1, and lo and behold we draw a pie chart. The pie chart itself is the same as what we've got over here. So what you might find is that if you've got your calculators handy, it might be easier to just draw what you can see over here or trace. So in summary, what we set out to do in this video was we wanted to have a look at how we can represent categorical data using figures. The first one we looked at was drawing it up in a tally and frequency table, and then we had a look at drawing the column graphs, bar charts and pie charts.